A forgotten signal. The war had lasted for centuries. Across the stars, the Xeltar Empire and the Free Coalition fought endless battles, each side refusing to surrender. Planets burned, fleets were destroyed, and yet no victor emerged. The war had become a cycle, one that seemed impossible to break. But everything changed on one fateful day. A small Free Coalition scout ship, Venture 7, drifted through the ruins of an ancient battlefield. Its hull was damaged, its fuel reserves low. The crew, tired and desperate, searched for a safe place to land. Their scanners picked up something unusual, a hidden structure on the surface of a dead moon. "Captain, I think we found an old Terran outpost," said Ensign Kiera, her voice uncertain. "It's intact." Captain Ryland frowned. The humans had vanished from the war a long time ago. No one knew why. Some believed they had gone extinct. Others whispered that they had simply left, watching from the shadows. But if this outpost was still standing, then perhaps humanity had left something behind. With no other options, the Venture 7 descended onto the moon's surface. The landing was rough, but the ship held together. The crew stepped out, their boots crunching against the lifeless ground. The Terran outpost loomed before them, silent, dark, and covered in the dust of centuries. The doors hissed open as Kiera hacked the access panel. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. The facility was massive, filled with old technology that still hummed faintly with power. "Stay sharp," Ryland warned. "We don't know what we're dealing with." They moved deeper into the outpost, past rusted control panels and forgotten corridors. Then they found it, an ancient terminal, still active. Its screen flickered, displaying strange symbols. Kiera wiped the dust away and squinted at the text. "Warning. Omega Puerto Col active. Status. Door amentive fleet on STA and DBI. Away Genao." Her heart pounded. "Captain, this isn't just a research outpost. It's a command center." Ryland stepped forward. "For what?" Before she could respond, the terminal beeped. A countdown appeared on the screen. "Activation in Puro Juriestat." A deep rumble shook the facility. Somewhere, deep in the void of space, something had awakened. The crew barely had time to react before their ship's comms flared to life. A voice, distorted and ancient, spoke through the static. "Humanity's vengeance has been long delayed, but it begins now." And then the signal was sent. Far beyond the battlefield, beyond the borders of the known galaxy, an old fleet, silent and forgotten, began to wake. Deep in the void, far beyond the borders of the known galaxy, something ancient stirred. Silent and motionless for centuries, the massive warships drifted in the darkness, their hulls covered in the dust of time. They had been waiting for a signal that was never supposed to come. And then it did. The activation signal raced through the vast emptiness of space, finding its way to the forgotten fleet. One by one, the ships came to life. Engines that had been dead for 1,000 years roared back into existence. Lights flickered on, illuminating the cold, metallic corridors. The silence of the grave was shattered by the hum of power flowing through the systems. Artificial intelligences, built with a singular purpose, awakened and began running diagnostics. Weapons recalibrated, shields activated, and battle systems were restored to full capacity. Deep within the largest warship, a voice spoke into the darkness. It was not human, yet it carried the echoes of those who had built it. Directive Omega acknowledged. Mission parameters restored. War status unresolved. Threat assessment in progress. The fleet's long-dormant sensors scanned the galaxy, gathering information. The war that had once driven humanity to the edge had never ended. The same enemies still ruled, still fought, still burned planets in their endless hunger for control. Humanity had vanished, but the war had not. The fleet calculated the situation with cold efficiency. The parameters of the old war had not changed. The objective remained the same: Eliminate the threat. Restore balance. Engines flared as the ships adjusted their positions. The fleet was massive. Thousands of warships, each designed for a level of destruction the galaxy had long forgotten. Battleships the size of cities moved into formation. Smaller cruisers and support ships synchronized their systems. The command ship, a monstrous dreadnought, positioned itself at the center. Deep within the bridge, another voice spoke. Preparing for immediate deployment. Calculating optimal strike location. Coordinates flashed across the screens. The fleet had chosen its target. The heart of the war. The place where the two warring factions were locked in their latest, pointless battle. The war had lasted centuries. But the fleet had no intention of letting it continue. A final command was issued. Engage jump drives. The war ends now. The fleet vanished in an instant, leaving only the silence of the void behind. The XLTAR fleet hovered in formation above the dying world of Voronus IV. Fires raged across the planet's surface, remnants of the latest battle against the Free Coalition. The war had stretched across centuries, but to the XLTAR victory was inevitable. Their war fleets were unmatched, their dominion over the galaxy unquestioned. The Coalition had resisted, but their forces were weakening. It was only a matter of time. Admiral Kareth watched from the command deck of the dreadnought Bloodfang, his cold yellow eyes locked on the wreckage below. Another battle won. Another step toward complete dominance. He turned to his bridge officers. Begin preparations for the final assault on the Coalition's core worlds. A shrill alarm cut through the air. A sudden spike in gravitational distortions appeared on their scanners. The crew scrambled to make sense of the readings. Admiral, a technician shouted, something is coming out of FTL. Multiple signatures, thousands of them. Kareth's eyes narrowed. More Coalition forces. The technician hesitated, his hands shaking as he analyzed the data. No, these readings don't match any known fleet. Their energy signatures are ancient. Before anyone could react, space itself seemed to tear open. Thousands of ships materialized in perfect formation. Their designs were unlike anything seen in the last millennium. Sleek, dark, and covered in markings long forgotten. The ships bore no insignia, no banners. They did not announce their arrival. They simply opened fire. Lances of energy, far beyond the technology of the current era, ripped through the XLTAR fleet. Shields collapsed instantly. Armor melted away as if it were nothing. Within seconds, a dozen XLTAR warships vanished into fire and debris. Kareth barely had time to process what was happening before his dreadnought shook violently. The force of the attack sent crew members flying across the command deck. Explosions rocked the interior. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The Admiral pulled himself up, his mind racing. Who in the void are they? No response came. The unknown fleet did not send a transmission. They did not demand surrender. They did not negotiate. They only destroyed. Across the battlefield, XLTAR warships scrambled to retaliate. Fighters launched. Plasma cannons fired blindly into the darkness. But nothing worked. The enemy ships moved with terrifying precision. Their weapons carved through XLTAR defenses like they were nothing more than paper. Kareth's heart pounded as he finally recognized what they were facing. The old war legends, the ancient warnings whispered through generations, the ghost fleet of humanity. The Terrans had returned, and they had come to end the war. The battlefield was chaos. XLTAR warships burned, their shattered hulls drifting through the void. The once mighty fleet, feared across the galaxy, was now nothing more than wreckage. The mysterious human fleet moved like a storm, precise, unstoppable, and merciless. Admiral Kareth clutched the edge of his command console as Bloodfang shook violently. The ship's shields had failed within seconds. Hull breaches spread across multiple decks. His crew screamed as fires erupted, consoles exploded, and the very foundation of the dreadnought cracked under the relentless assault. Admiral, we've lost primary thrusters. Weapons are offline, a bridge officer cried. Kareth's mind raced. How? How was this possible? Humanity had vanished centuries ago. Their technology should have been outdated, forgotten relics of a lost species. And yet, here they were, destroying the Xeltar fleet as if it were nothing. He gritted his teeth. Open a channel to the enemy fleet. We must negotiate. The comms officer frantically tried to establish a link, but the system refused to connect. The humans did not respond. They did not acknowledge surrender. Kareth's blood ran cold. They are not here to negotiate, he whispered. A new wave of human warships surged forward. These were not ordinary vessels. They were larger, their hulls reinforced with an alloy unseen in modern warfare. Their weapons unleashed devastating beams of energy that pierced through entire squadrons at once. Kareth watched in horror as his remaining fleet was picked apart with terrifying efficiency. Xeltar cruisers tried to escape, but the humans were faster. Destroyers attempted to regroup, but their signals were jammed. There was no escape. The Admiral's claws dug into the console. He had been so certain of victory. The Xeltar Empire had been destined to rule. But this was not a battle. This was a massacre. A bright warning light flashed across the command deck. One of the human dreadnoughts had locked onto Bloodfang. Kareth turned to his crew, eyes filled with something he had never felt before. Fear. For the first time in his life, he understood why the old war legends spoke of humanity with such dread. The final attack came without hesitation. A colossal energy beam erupted from the Terran warship, striking Bloodfang with unimaginable force. The Xeltar dreadnought shattered, breaking apart into burning fragments. The last thing Kareth saw before the explosion consumed him was the symbol now glowing on the enemy fleet's hulls, a symbol the galaxy had long forgotten. The mark of the lost human empire. The destruction of the Xeltar fleet sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Every major faction, every empire, and every warlord received the same terrifying message. The lost human fleet had returned. Survivors of the massacre on Varonis IV spread stories of ships unlike anything seen before, of weapons that ignored shields and tore through the strongest armor. The Xeltar Empire, once feared as an unstoppable force, had been crushed in mere minutes. Entire fleets reduced to debris. Dreadnoughts shattered like glass. And the worst part, the humans never spoke a word. They did not demand surrender. They did not claim territory. They appeared, they obliterated, and then they moved on. Across the galaxy, panic spread like wildfire. The Council of Sovereign Races, an alliance of the most powerful civilizations, called an emergency meeting. Holograms of the greatest leaders filled the grand chamber. Warlords, emperors, high chancellors, all speaking at once, their voices filled with fear. They are ghosts, one leader shouted. Humanity was wiped out centuries ago. How is this possible? Technology like this should not exist, another cried. Our fleets are powerless against them. We must negotiate. Negotiate. An armored warlord slammed his fist onto the table. They do not speak. They do not answer. They only destroy. Silence filled the chamber. No one had an answer. The humans were an unknown force, moving without warning, appearing without explanation. What did they want? Why had they returned now? And then a message arrived. Not from the humans, but from their next target. The Free Coalition, once locked in war with the Xeltar, sent a desperate distress signal. Their fleets, already weakened by years of battle, now faced the same fate. The human fleet had arrived, and the massacre was about to begin again. The Free Coalition had fought many wars. They had faced the brutal Xeltar, the cunning Vathari, and the relentless Swarm. But nothing had prepared them for this. The human fleet arrived without warning. Their ships, silent and cold, cast massive shadows over the Coalition's last stronghold. The star system of Eldara Prime was home to their final fleet, their strongest defenses. If they fell here, the coalition would be no more. Admiral Ralvik, a veteran of countless battles, stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Pillar of Dawn. His reptilian eyes watched the enemy fleet materialize from the void. Thousands of ships, dark, silent, unstoppable. Are they responding to hails? He asked, his voice tense. The communications officer shook her head. Nothing, sir. They refused to speak. Ralvik clenched his jaw. He had heard the stories. The XL-TAR fleet had been erased in minutes. The humans did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They only destroyed. Then we have no choice. He turned to his crew. All ships, defensive formations. We fight until our last breath. The orders spread across the fleet. Thousands of coalition warships moved into position. Fighters launched. Plasma cannons powered up. Shields reinforced. Every available weapon was aimed at the approaching specters of war. And then, the humans attacked. They moved like predators, precise and merciless. Their weapons ignored shields. Their ships evaded targeting systems, as if they could predict every move. Coalition destroyers exploded in rapid succession. Battleships, built to withstand entire sieges, shattered like glass. Admiral Ralvik watched in horror as his forces vanished. No, he whispered. His mind screamed for a solution, but there was none. The humans were beyond anything he had ever faced. Then, a new signal appeared on the scanners. Something massive. Ralvik's eyes widened as a colossal Terran dreadnought emerged from the darkness. It was larger than any station he had ever seen. Its hull, covered in ancient symbols, radiated power. This was no ordinary warship. This was a weapon of extinction. As the dreadnought charged its main cannon, Ralvik realized the truth. This was not just the return of humanity. This was the end of the war. The battlefield over Eldara Prime was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. The last remnants of the Free Coalition's fleet burned in the void. Their warships shattered, their defenses useless against the relentless power of the human armada. Admiral Ralvik stood frozen on the bridge of the Pillar of Dawn, watching his people fall one by one. Every attempt at resistance had failed. The Terran dreadnought, a behemoth from a forgotten era, now loomed over his crippled flagship. The comms officer's voice shook. "Sir, they're charging their primary weapon." Ralvik looked at the scanners, energy levels spiking. No weapon in the galaxy had ever reached such power. This wasn't just an attack. This was annihilation. He swallowed hard. For centuries, the galaxy had assumed humanity was gone, just a lost chapter in history. Now that they had returned, and they had erased two of the most powerful factions in days. The XL-TAR, the Free Coalition, both had been reduced to nothing. Ralvik took a deep breath. His hands trembled as he opened a channel. Maybe, just maybe, they could be reasoned with. "This is Admiral Ralvik of the Free Coalition," he said, his voice calm despite the fear clawing at his chest. "We surrender." Silence. The humans had ignored every attempt at communication before. But this time, something changed. A response came through. A single voice, ancient and cold. Too late. A blinding light filled the void. The Terran dreadnought's main cannon fired. The last great fleet of the Free Coalition ceased to exist. Ralvik had always believed the war with the XL-TAR would decide the future of the galaxy. But he had been wrong. Humanity had returned, and the war ended in a flash.